Back to World Cup analysis as we got ready to go here. We had a little bit of a technical issue, but we're back. We're ready to roll. Galen Clavia here. Thanks for joining us a little bit later than normal, but we're happy to be joining you and talk about what was a very action-packed first couple of days here as far as the end of group stage play in the World Cup. Obviously, we had some duds this morning. The Group C games, as predicted, were not that great. There wasn't a whole lot on the line for any of those teams. So we're going to talk about those a little bit, but we're primarily going to be focusing on the games that took place at the end of the day. And man, a couple of really, really excellent contests. As we saw Argentina come back from the dead, we saw Nigeria kind of give it up at the end. We saw Iceland give Croatia a bit of a scare, and we saw the Croatians become the second team to go through with all of the points out of the group stage. So if you've got questions or comments, please hit us up at the Periscope chat. We just had somebody chip in, and we'll get to their comments here in just a second. You can also hit me up on Twitter. We had a couple of people do that already, at Dr. GC. Let's go ahead and hit up this first question from Bobby Rusiliano. Argentina is on a free roll. Don't be surprised if they win the whole thing now. I will be a little surprised if they win the whole thing now, because while I agree that today's game certainly gave them some definite motivation, and I think will maybe gave them some faith in themselves, which they've been missing. I still think they're a long way away from being a complete enough team. There were a lot of cracks that popped up, even cracks we hadn't really completely seen yet out of that Argentina squad, that I would be worried about moving forward. But I kind of don't hate their chances in their first group stage game, or their first knockout stage game. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But let's go ahead and talk about the games from today. So let's just hit the big one. Argentina 2, Nigeria 1. Really heartbreaking for Nigeria, as all they really needed to do was draw in this game, and they were going to get through. They were strangely passive in this contest. And I think that, as we've seen really time and time again in this World Cup so far, that was what did them in. This idea that you can go out and not play positive, aggressive football and still come away with a positive result, I think it's been disproven pretty regularly, with maybe the possible exception of France, because I don't know what the hell France is doing at this point. But no, Nigeria, they only had possession for 33% of the game. They only got 3 shots on target for the whole game. The only thing they really did consistently well in this contest was foul. They had some good offensive chances, yes, but they really, just unfortunately for them, I think, they were really trying to play not to lose, not to get a point, or not to let Argentina get a point. And it's a shame, because I think what we saw when they really opened it up in their game against Iceland was that this is a team that's got a lot of skill. Maybe not as skilled as Senegal, but certainly a very skilled squad. I certainly think they were skilled enough that they could have put another goal on Argentina and at the very least gotten a 2-2 draw. But instead, they sat back, and I think by the time they finally tried to get themselves going again, Argentina at that point had the bit in their teeth, and they weren't going to let them do so. But certainly you have to feel positively for Lionel Messi. All the people who have chimed in over the course of the shows that we've done over the last 2 weeks and have kind of proclaimed Messi's era to be over, or that Ronaldo's era is superior. Those people had a rough day today. Messi was excellent when his team gave him support, and certainly in that first 30 minutes or so, I think that was the best 30-minute stretch we've seen out of him internationally in a while. He did an excellent job. That first touch he had on that ball that he pulled down on the goal that he scored was sublime. But for those who watch the game closely, to be able to have such a light first touch where the ball doesn't carom off you when it's coming at you at an angle from high up, to be able to basically cradle it, get it down, and then get a shot off, and have the accuracy that he had. I mean, it was just a sublime finish. It's one of the things that makes Messi such a dynamic player. And for those of us who are Messi supporters, perhaps more so than Ronaldo supporters, it's that subtlety that really marks his game, I think. And he almost got a second goal. It took an outstanding effort by Uzoho, the goalkeeper for Nigeria, to keep that free kick that he had on the edge of the box out of the back of the net. Just an amazing effort by Messi. But then, as we've seen, Argentina, too much reliance on old guys. Mascherano, I don't know why he was in the game. I mean, he was just a mess, and it wasn't just the foul that he committed. On the what ended up being the PK that Victor Moses converted, that was a bad play certainly, and yeah, there was a little bit of diving involved. But Mascherano is just so slow right now. He is just incapable of playing at the speed that you need to beat a team like Nigeria on most nights. And it's not just him. I mean, Higuain certainly struggled throughout the course of the game, and we've seen that happen time and time again in international play from him. You sat around and you wondered, where's Paulo Dybala from Juventus? He's not playing because he and Messi, Messi does not like him apparently. Where was Sergio Aguero? We finally saw him come on late in the game, but still some very confusing substitution patterns by Sapali. And just generally a malaise for Argentina, particularly after the PK goal by Moses in the 51st minute. There was about a 25-minute stretch there where Argentina just looked like they were going to pack it in. But give them a lot of credit. I mean, not just with the second goal, but with the way that they played overall. This was a team that, from all appearances, was ready to just give up the ghost. There were rumors of a mutiny against the manager. And somehow they figured out a way to put it together and get a result against what was a pretty good Nigeria team. And so they end up going through on 4 points. I really did feel for Nigeria. It was an unfortunate ending to what had been a pretty good tournament for them overall. They looked really, really good against Iceland. But unfortunately, they had a very, very strong Croatia team, I think much stronger than people would have thought coming into the tournament. And Argentina finally figured out a way to put it together at the end. And like I said yesterday when I was doing my preview, I had a sneaking suspicion Argentina was going to figure out a way to get through in this group, and they ended up doing so. Some comments here from people. A lot of questions here from Bobby Ursiliano. Let me tackle some of these. One thing I've learned about the World Cup is that the group stage means absolutely nothing as long as you get through. And that's 100% true. I totally agree. The group stage, you can play bad in the group stage and suddenly come to life in the knockouts. You can play great in the group stage and you can lose in the first round of knockout games. We've seen it happen both ways before. I do think there are some structural issues with this Argentina squad. I think their defense especially is very old, very slow, and I'm really concerned about what's going on as far as their attack is concerned. It doesn't seem like a team that fits well together. I think their backs were 100% to the wall. And I'll get to where I think that leads in just a second. I want to get to a couple of these other questions, though. Amazing win for Argentina. This again from Bobby. They're playing with house money now. Absolutely nothing to lose. Pressure is off, and now up to the talents. So they are certainly playing with house money. I wonder if they're ready to cash their chips in, though. Because here's the thing. I think there's a level of shame involved in going out in the group stage, particularly when you've got Iceland and Nigeria in your group. And particularly when, leading into this game, you hadn't won a game and you'd, only scored one goal in the first two games. I think going out like that, and if you're Messi going out without scoring a goal, I think that would have been, something that they would have had a real hard time with across the board in that country. Now they're through, and they're going to play France in the round of 16. And while I'm certain that there will be criticisms in Argentina, and I'm certain that the guys will be sad if they lose that game, the idea that you would lose a knockout stage game in any round to a French team that I think most people had as either the favorite or the second favorite coming into the tournament, there's a lot less shame in that. And, I think the big thing for Argentina was get through to the knockout stage. And, that's once you do that, then you put yourself in a position where, yeah, you're going to get criticized some if you go out. But I think people deep down know this isn't that great of an Argentina team. And the idea that, they would go out to the French if they did so, I think that would be at least not terribly received long term. certainly wouldn't be one of those things like the Italians where, oh, we've been out, we went out in the group stage in 2010 and 2014, and hey, we didn't make the tournament at all in 2018. That's a level of shame far greater than getting to the round of 16 and then losing, regardless of the opponent. Another question, would you rather be sitting like England or Argentina right now? I'd rather be England, to be honest with you. I mean, the English to me almost seem like the antithesis of Argentina. There's so much pressure on this Argentina team. There's a great piece in The Guardian today that you should read from a former Argentina great whose name is completely escaping me right now. I'll call it up and let you know. But it talked about the problems with the way that Argentinians view their soccer and the way that they've dealt with things in their country. And the name of the writer is Jorge Valdano, who played for Argentina on their 1986 team, actually scored for them in the World Cup final. And the title of the piece was, what's wrong with Argentina? We now value balls more than talent. And it goes through this whole thing about how, the way that Argentina used to play, the thing that made them proud about it, the street level ball that they elevated to an art form has gradually gone away. And unlike in the rich countries, nothing's replaced it. A guy like Messi is viewed with a lot of suspicion because he wasn't molded in Argentina. He was molded in Spain. And so people have a suspicion of that. If you're not from one of these countries, there's a lot of cultural things that you probably don't get that I think are really fascinating when you get down to the granular level about the way that an Argentinian culture or a Brazilian culture views their game and the way that their players play it and the way that they learn it. And there's there's this creeping level of colonialism and I guess professionalism in the way that the game is taught in, like La Masia, the famous Barcelona academy, or the way that it's taught in Germany. There's a suspicion of that it's a kind of a joyless, antiseptic academic way of learning football, which can still produce great players, but it doesn't produce the kind of passion that you would get out of the great Argentine players or the great Brazilian players that, populated the sport in the 60s and 70s and 80s. There's a lot of that going on. So I think there's a lot of psychological pressure going on with Argentina. And I think that that's the same sort of psychological pressure, ironically, that England has faced for years and years and years, like for decades, where putting on the England shirt meant carrying the weight of expectations that, frankly, you couldn't bear. There was too much of a burden for most of the players that did it. In 1990, that team kind of came out of nowhere, got all the way, I think, to the third place game, and really kind of seemed like it was going to blaze the path for something really positive moving forward. And then they didn't qualify in 94. They went out on penalties in 98. They got, I think, to the quarters in 2002 and in 2006, but they still didn't do a whole lot. And then certainly they underperformed in 2010 and definitely in 2014. This England team feels different. And I would rather be this England team than this Argentina team. Because even though this England team doesn't have anybody of the same talent level as Messi, this England team seems like they like each other. They play pretty well together. They've had two really good games, granted against inferior competition to what Argentina faced. But they've scored goals. They seem to have closed ranks, and they're not letting the typical English tabloid media affect them. And, at the end of the day, they've already qualified. They're through, and who they play in the next round doesn't really matter that much because it's not going to be a world-beating team. They could lose, certainly, in that first knockout round, but they're not going to go in having to face one of the top four teams in the tournament in the first round of the knockouts. And, so I would much rather be them than Argentina at this stage because there doesn't seem to be that psychological pressure. They seem to be enjoying their football. They seem to be enjoying each other. And they seem to be competent all across the pitch. Like there's really not a true weak link on that England squad. I'm a little iffy about Kyle Walker in a 3 center back setup. That's not his game. I'm not really wild about what's going on with Sterling and a couple of the other England players, but Harry Kane's scoring a lot of goals. Kieran Trippier's been a revelation, I think, for a lot of people in this World Cup thus far. And they've gotten some good play out of Maguire and out of Stones. And so I like their setup a lot better at this point. Good questions. We got a lot of good questions coming in. We'll just go ahead and continue to tackle these. The French did not impress me at all today against Denmark. Let's go ahead and talk about that game real quick, because that was the other one that involved, two teams that were in direct competition for a place. That was the worst game of the tournament so far, I think. And ironic that it featured what might have been the most talented team in the tournament in France. There was a great piece in SB Nation where they talked about how the French manager, Didier Deschamps, is playing this incredibly conservative style of football with France right now. And the writer, and I don't know if this is actually true, but the writer claimed it was because Deschamps was the captain of the '98 France squad that won the World Cup on home soil, but Deschamps got criticized by this striker on the French team that he was a water carrier. That basically he wasn't the best player on the team, that he was just kind of there to serve the talents of other people. And the hypothesis of this piece was basically that Deschamps is basically taking an incredibly talented team, maybe among the most talented teams we've had in the last 40, 45, maybe 50 years, and is making them play dumbed down, heavily defensive football for basically to prove a point. I don't know what the point could possibly be. I think at the end of the day, he might not be that great of a manager, and he might be limited on the tactical ideas that he's got. But one way or another, if you look at the way that France played, people were concerned about the way they played against Australia in the first game, and they won that one 2-1, I think it was. And then they were concerned about the way they played against Peru because they won the game, but they just kind of did just enough to win the game. They didn't really go out and dominate like you would have expected. And then in today's game against Denmark pressed them a little bit. They didn't really do much to, they sustained the pressure, but Denmark got some pretty good looks. And, if you watch this French team, they were my pick to win the World Cup. I still feel fairly good about the talent, but I really do have some concerns now about the way the talent is being utilized. And it's such a remarkable collection when you look across the board at what France brings to the table. The fact that you've got Paul Pogba in the starting lineup, and you've got, N'Golo Kante as a defensive midfielder, and you've got, Giroud at top, and you've got Griezmann in the attacking midfielder role. And it's a really, really fascinating collection of talent. And across the board, it's world class. And yet they just don't feel like a team that's playing even at the level of some of the other top teams that have struggled a bit. We've watched Brazil, and Brazil's struggled in both of their games thus far. But I still feel like Brazil is playing better than what we've seen so far out of France in any of their games. Spain certainly has struggled in their matchups, but I feel like collectively they're playing a lot better and a lot more cohesively. England, I think, is certainly playing better. Belgium's playing better. Does France have an on switch, or is this what we're going to get out of them? If this is what we get out of them, I think they'll probably still make it to the semifinals, because right now their path is that flawed Argentina team that we talked about earlier, and then the winner of Portugal versus Uruguay. And certainly, they lost to Portugal in the Euro final, so they could certainly lose to them again. And certainly Uruguay has a couple of still very, very good offensive players in Cavani and Suarez. But you would think that even on somewhat of cruise control, France can tackle either of those teams, no pun intended. But you get to the semis, and now you're talking about playing a Brazil or playing, potentially an England or a Belgium or a Germany. That becomes a much trickier proposition. So I'm concerned about France. I think officially we've gone ahead and flipped the concern switch to on, and now it's just a matter of do they have a switch themselves that they can flip on as they get into the knockout round. It'll be interesting to watch. Let's talk about the other two games real quick from the day. First, we'll talk a little bit about the other game in Group C, which was Peru versus Australia. And hey, I salute Peru. I mentioned this on Twitter earlier on. The teams that were already out of the competition did not just roll over and die across the board. We saw Saudi Arabia put their best game in against Egypt. We certainly saw Morocco put in a dynamite performance yesterday as they took on Spain. And Peru continued that trend. They didn't have a whole lot of possession, and they only took 4 shots, but 3 of those shots were on target, and 2 of those shots ended up as goals. They didn't overfoul. I thought they really looked they looked a lot more positive than Australia. Australia was a little bit unlucky, 14 shots and only 2 of them on target. But I thought Peru looked like the better side, and I was happy to see Peru come away with some points. They certainly deserved some points in terms of their effort level over the course of the 3 games, and it was happy to see them get 3 points. They ended up completely knocking the Australians out. Not that Australia had much of a chance to get through. There was still a glimmer of hope, a slim one at that. But good for Peru. Glad they got the points. They finished 3rd in the group. Last game we'll touch on real quick is the other game from Group D today, which was Iceland versus Croatia. And you know what? This was a fun game. This was a really entertaining game. You want to talk about a team that I feel like had some reasons to be aggrieved. Iceland had so many good looks. They had 6 shots on goal, and the fact that they got the one penalty from Sigurdsson, but man, a couple of point-blank shots, a couple of headers that drifted just wide. Iceland could have easily won this game 3-2 or 4-2, which would have really made things interesting, because if they had been tied on points with Argentina, they would have probably gone through, given that scenario. So a really good performance by Iceland. I think they unfortunately ran into a Croatia team that, to me, has been perhaps the best under-the-radar team of this whole tournament so far. It might be between them and Japan, frankly, as far as teams I wasn't expecting a huge amount out of that have really, really impressed. I mean, this was a really, really good effort by Croatia throughout the course of this game. And, at the end of the day, it was a really, really good performance by Kalinic. And, you really had to like the fact that, Croatia got goals when it counted and Iceland couldn't. At the end of the day, that's what matters. So I feel bad for Iceland, just like I feel bad for Nigeria. That's a group where, it's like, man, why couldn't we have gotten all 4 teams into the knockout stage? Because I think they would have given us some awesome games. But that's not how the tournament works. So anyway, we got a few other questions we want to get to before we wrap things up. First of all, we had a question from Michael Clausen. Thank you for watching, Michael. I always appreciate it. If you're Southgate, the England manager, who from Group H do you want to draw in the knockout round? That's a tough one. Because of the 3 remaining teams, you got Colombia, you've got Japan, and you've got Senegal. And each of them presents their own particular issues. I probably would want Japan out of that group, because Japan has shown that they can play really well in the knockout round. They did so in 2010. They can show they play well in the group stage. They made it to the knockout stage in 2010. They didn't make it out of the group stage in 2014, but I think of the 3, they are the team that probably has the least amount of athletic talent on the pitch. And I think for England, they've certainly got a lot of young legs, and I think that defensively they could handle Japan. I think that, from the standpoint of who would be the easiest to advance against, that would be my choice. I'm concerned if I have to play Colombia, because Colombia looks like they're starting to come into their own. I've got them picked right now to come out of this group, and you can't deny the stars. I mean, James Rodriguez looks like he's back and at least close to 100%. And certainly you've got Falcao out there, who's finally gotten off the scoring schneid in the World Cup. You're going to have some top level defenders out there. I wouldn't want to play Colombia if I was in the first knockout round. And honestly, Senegal is a team I would avoid as well. That is a very loaded Senegal squad. A lot of really good players from front to back. Certainly people know Sadio Mane, but if you follow Serie A, some of the players that play in defense for Senegal. It's a really, really solid squad. So if I'm England, I'm probably ranking my wish list of opponents: Japan first, probably Senegal second, just because African teams have historically struggled in the knockout stages. And then I'd probably rank Colombia as my least desirable team to play. Bobby asks, if Germany gets Brazil, who do you like? Yeah, if that's a knockout stage, like first round game, whew, um, I probably I probably like Brazil in that game for a couple of reasons. One, lost in the euphoria of the way that Germany beat Sweden. It's the fact that that didn't look like a very good Germany team against Sweden. I mean, they really struggled to break Sweden down. And yes, Sweden's an organized team, but a lot of the changes that Jogi Löw made did not really work well. They didn't result in better offensive chances by and large. I mean, they got a lot of chances against Argentina, or against Sweden, sorry, but that's because Sweden was bunkering most of the game and they couldn't break through that. There still seems to be some disconnect. You took Özil out of the lineup, which means now you really can't put Özil back in the lineup. Like, we're not going to suddenly see Mesut Özil pop back up again, which that certainly solves some problems, but I think it creates some problems as well. We've heard talk of a division on the squad between the Bayern-based players and the foreign-based players for Germany. That's a problem. That's not just going to go away because they beat Sweden. So, even though Brazil struggled a little bit in their group, I do think that Brazil's had, tougher opponents. Because I look at what Brazil has had to do so far. Costa Rica is a tough team. I mean, we've seen that. Costa Rica was a tough team in 2014, and they've been one of the few South and Central American squads that's really escaped this malaise that has set in playing in Russia. And then, if you look at that Switzerland squad's pretty good. They got some pretty good talent on that team. So I look at it and I say to myself, yeah, if I'm trying to pick that game, I'm probably giving the nod to Brazil, because you also have to factor in Brazil wants blood when it comes to Germany. Like, Germany came in to Brazilian soil and they didn't just beat Brazil in 2014. They utterly embarrassed Brazil, and they've been smug about it ever since. And that's the sort of game where if I'm Brazil, I'm going to come out and I'm going to just be completely fired up for that game, and I'm going to be all over the pitch from the get-go. So I think if that is indeed a first knockout stage matchup, that's a bad matchup for Germany. Not because I think Germany's less talented, but because I think that Brazil is going to be loaded for bear in that contest. Kevin asks, if Germany's missing Leroy Sané. They probably are, but there's a couple of things about Sané that are important to keep in mind. One is that the reason Sané got left off the team was because there are certain members of the team that consider him to be a kind of a locker room cancer, that he has a very bad attitude, that he's petulant. And I do wonder how much of that is actually him being petulant and how much of that is this divide that seems to exist between the German-based players, or at least the Bayern-based players, and the non-Bayern-based players. And maybe that's being overstated by certain media members that I've been reading, but I do think that it's a factor. Would Sané's talent have been useful? Yeah, almost certainly. But I also think to some degree what Germany's missing isn't necessarily what Sané would deliver, because I think that they've got plenty of offensive talent. Like Germany's got an embarrassment of riches when it comes to what they're able to do in any lineup. I mean, that is one of the most talented teams that you're going to see. Werner doesn't get looked at as much here in the U.S. as he does in other parts of the world, but that's a really, really talented player. Mueller is certainly a talented player. Reyes is a talented player. I mean, I'm not worried about what's up front for them, but they seem to be lacking a decisiveness in what they do, which is a very un-German sort of thing. And so while I do think that Sané in a vacuum is kind of is a piece that would be useful at this World Cup, I do think that it goes much deeper than that. Let's see. Someone mentioned Argentina versus Germany final game. It could potentially happen. That would be a fascinating finish to things, kind of a repeat of 2014. But it would require Germany winning the group, because right now, if Germany finishes in second, which statistically is the most likely thing, they would be on the same side of the bracket as Argentina. So it would require Argentina beating France, beating the winner of Portugal and Uruguay, and then it would require Germany coming out, but they would have to match up in the semi. They wouldn't be able to match up in the final. If Germany wins the group, which is unlikely, because I think in the tiebreaker, Sweden would actually win the group. There's a lot of weird tiebreakers that come into this if it's a three-way tie. But in that case, Germany would be on the other side of the bracket. So that's from Travis Bickle 88 there. Deo Crown says, man, I'm nervous for Brazil with Serbia more than if they meet Germany. I think that's a really good point. I think if you're Germany, like the teams that are going to hurt you the most right now are teams that are going to be very physical with you. And I think Switzerland actually fits into this category, maybe even more so than Serbia does, because I think Switzerland's more talented than Serbia. I think Serbia is, how do I put this without insulting part of the audience? I think that what Serbia brings to the table is the same sort of physicality that Croatia brings to the table, but I think Croatia's got better skill players than Serbia's got. Their styles of play are more similar than they are different. I think Switzerland brings that same physical style of play, but I think they're better organized, and I think they've got two bona fide offensive stars. Granted, they might not be able to play since there's apparently some disciplinary proceedings going on involving both Granit Xhaka and Xherdan Shaqiri, involving those double-headed eagle signs that they made with their hands after they scored in the last game. I think they'll probably end up playing. I can't see them suspending them for 2 matches, which is what's been talked about, but that is something to keep an eye on. But yeah, if I'm Brazil, if I'm Germany, I am concerned about having to play Serbia or Switzerland. But I also be concerned about them playing Brazil. That said, I still think that the Germans have something in the tank. I'm kind of bringing up the negatives here because that's what's being brought up. And Kevin says that I believe that they were just fined. I had missed that news today. If that's the case, then that's probably for the best. I'm glad. Talking about Shaqiri and Xhaka. But yeah, no, I think the Germany thing's fascinating. I also think something to keep in mind with Germany tomorrow morning, don't sleep on South Korea. This is a South Korean squad that's got a lot of pride. They've got one really, really good player. And, I could see this game breaking one of two ways. I could see Germany getting their customary 3-0 or 4-0 victory in the group stage. Or I could see South Korea hanging around and grabbing a late goal. Germany has to win this game, but we've seen that these teams that are at the bottom of the group that can't qualify, they've been giving it their all. And South Korea, weirdly enough, is not out of it yet. I know it's very odd, to think about because they're on 0 points right now, but there is still a path for South Korea to get to the knockout stage. Granted, a lot of stuff has to happen for them to do that, but they still can kind of have something come out of this. So that's something to keep an eye on. I still think Germany wins. But those are the 2 early games tomorrow. We've got Mexico-Sweden at 10, and we've got South Korea-Germany at 10. One last thing on the Xhaka and Shaqiri thing. Deo Crown points out in chat that those two always do the double eagle Albanian flag after they score. I'll take your word for it on that. I haven't observed it that closely. It had heightened political significance since they were playing the team that they were playing. I think that's kind of the important thing there, because there's certainly some overtones there against Serbia that you wouldn't get doing it against Brazil, for instance. Anyway, so your 10 o'clock games are Group F. Mexico, Sweden. Mexico really just needs a draw. They get a draw. They go through. Germany needs to beat South Korea, and then we'll see what happens from there. If that was the case, Mexico would be 1, Germany would be 2. That is the most likely scenario, I think, right now. And then Group E's final games are tomorrow as well. You got Switzerland, Costa Rica, and you've got Serbia, Brazil. I look at that, and I think you're probably going to see Switzerland and Brazil coming out of that. That would be my guess. I think they'll probably both win, and I think that'll send Brazil through as the winner and Switzerland as the runner-up. I wouldn't be shocked if Serbia grabs something out of the game, but even if Serbia draws with Brazil, if Switzerland wins, Brazil and Switzerland would both go through. It would just be that Switzerland would be the number 1 team and Brazil would be 2, which means instead of Brazil-Germany in the opening stage of knockouts, we would get Germany-Switzerland, which is also a very fascinating game, but not nearly as sexy as the one that we would be taken from at this point. Someone asked, when did I quit the Doobie Brothers? 1978. I left around the same time that Michael McDonald did. We had a couple of questions on Twitter. Where did the question go? Craig DeChemin, who's been watching all week, thank you. What country has surprised me the most so far during the World Cup? I mentioned earlier, I've been surprised at how well Croatia has played. I always like watching Croatia. They normally put an attractive brand of soccer out there, but to finish +6, to only concede once, to get all 9 points out of a group that contained Argentina and Nigeria and Iceland, that's a pretty good accomplishment. And I love their roster. Luka Modric is one of my all-time favorite players. I've been very impressed with how they played. I was impressed with how they came back today. If I had a runner-up team of the teams that I've been the most impressed by, I think it's Japan. The fact that they're right now leading their group and they have a chance to secure passage in their game that they play on Thursday, that's big. I mean, for a Japan team that nobody thought was going to do anything, and the fact that they get to play a Poland team that has nothing to play for and really has shown no spark, and really all they need to get out of that game, I think, is just a point. Because if they draw that game, then Colombia Colombia would have to win anyway, I think, to get through. But Senegal has to get something out of their game as well. And right now, I believe Japan has the tiebreaker on Senegal. So Japan's played really well. So Croatia and Japan, I think, are the two teams I've been the most impressed by. I don't know how far either of those goes. I could see Croatia's problem is that right now, I mean, they play Denmark in the round of 16. That shouldn't be that big of a deal. But then they're almost certainly going to have to play Spain in the quarterfinal. That's a much bigger issue. I don't know if that Croatia is much better built, frankly, to play against somebody like England or someone like Brazil as opposed to playing against somebody like Spain, I think, just given the composition of their roster and the way that they play. But no, I've been impressed with both of those teams. I think that might be all the we had one question from earlier on today from David Griggs. Let's see. Where did that go? It went, okay, here we go. In the unlikely event, we came down to drawing lots, which is a tiebreaker. It's like the 7th tiebreaker or the 8th tiebreaker. Should FIFA ranking be the final tiebreaker rather than what amounts to a coin flip? No. Here's the problem with FIFA rankings is that they're just sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. Peru played very well in this tournament. I don't want to disparage Peru. Peru was ranked 11th in FIFA rankings coming into this tournament. And it's like, no, I don't see it. It's like the FIFA rankings they're kind of like the RPI in American basketball for the college level, which if you follow, and Kevin Kernan points out Wales is 13th in the FIFA rankings. Like they put a lot of weight on tournament performance, which is certainly one aspect of things. And they put a lot of weight on friendlies, which isn't really that big of a deal. And so I look at the FIFA rankings and I say to myself, you need some kind of ranking system, but as far as like the determination of who advances and who doesn't, I don't buy it. I think it's it would be just as bad as drawing lots, because at least with drawing lots, you've got a 50-50. It's a sucky way to not advance in the World Cup. And fortunately, we haven't had it happen in a little while, but I don't think FIFA ranking is the answer either. There has to be another better way of doing it, but I haven't been able to think of one since you asked the question. So a couple other comments here. Dio Crown comments, Denmark will beat Croatia. Eriksson's class in the 10 role will be the difference. I do think it's fascinating that the matchup of former central midfielder for Spurs versus current central midfielder for Spurs, Luka Modric versus Christian Eriksen in a round of 16 game. I am actually looking forward to that game. I just haven't been impressed with Denmark. I've been really underwhelmed with how they've played. Today was their best game, I think, that they've played so far, and it was against an uninspired French team. They probably should have allowed at least a goal, to Peru when they played them, and I didn't think they looked particularly good against Australia either. So in that scenario, I think Croatia's got the stronger team, and I would probably tip them as the winners. But it'll be a fun game to watch. I think it'll be kind of an underrated game. They do have schedules out. Last thing I'll say before we break up for the night. So Saturday, great day of football. France, Argentina, 10 o'clock in the morning. That's some good waking up football for those of you on the West Coast. It'll be a 7 a.m. game. And then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we get Uruguay versus Portugal, Ronaldo versus Suarez. And I mean, that'll be a fun game. There'll be a lot of dark arts in that game as far as flops and fouls drawn and things like that. But there shall also be some sublime play as well. Round of 16 games on Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern time start in the U.S. for Spain versus Russia. I'm curious to see how Russia plays in that game. We'll talk a lot more about these on Friday when we do our preview of the knockout stage. And then 2 o'clock on Sunday, we'll have Croatia versus Denmark, the game that we just talked about. So anyway, last question here from Dale Crown. Best World Cup ever for you? Man, this has been a really good World Cup. I got to say, obviously I think that World Cups, they make their medal in the knockout stages because that's when the most memorable games are. I think you could make a legitimate argument it's been the most compelling group stage play ever because there's been some really close groups. Nobody's really run away with their groups. Even the groups that have had good teams, there's normally 2 good teams there that have been competing and have put decent games in. My favorite World Cup leading up to this one was 2006. Not just because Italy won, but I think there were a lot of really quality games in that 2006 World Cup. There was a lot of compelling stuff that happened across the board. Whether it was kind of young Ronaldo with Scolari and that whole group. Portugal getting all the way to the semifinals, Brazil unexpectedly flaming out in the quarters. Just a lot of different aspects of that World Cup I found pretty compelling. Italy kind of getting up off the funeral pyre and off of that whole, scandal with Serie A and coming through and winning the whole thing. Germany kind of resurrecting themselves after a disappointing 2004, and getting back to the semis, and then a great final that had that bizarre finish with Zidane. So that 06 was probably my favorite of all time, and I think probably the best one that I've watched. But this one's got the potential. There's going to be a lot of good teams in the final. We'll see. A couple other last questions here. No, I'm not Joe Dirt. I don't know. That's the first time that's popped up. That's good. Will Brazil win the World Cup? We talked about this at length earlier. I'm sorry if you missed it. Right now, I want to see how the whole knockout stage works. I don't know that I think my favorite right now is probably Spain instead of Brazil, largely because Spain's going to have an easier path to get to the final. I think that, Brazil, certainly none of the top teams have played great, but I think that Brazil and Spain, they both have a tremendous amount of talent and they seem to be using it potentially better than, say, France or Germany, given the problems that those squads have had. But I think that Brazil just will have a few more hurdles to get over versus Spain because of where Spain is at in the bracket right now. So right now I would say Spain is my temporary, I'm not even going to say they're my pick, but if I had to put money on a team right now, it would probably be the Spanish. So anyway, thanks to so many of you for joining me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And we'll be back tomorrow, probably earlier on in the day. I think we're going to go right after the games and that second window of games. We'll have a lot to talk about there. So come ready with your questions and comments. You can hit me up at Dr. GC on Twitter. I'm happy to chat with you there and answer questions here on the podcast from that. So thanks for watching World Cup Analysis. We'll catch you on the flip side.